Is Julen Lopetegui the right man for West Ham United? Some fans seem to have already concluded that perhaps he's not, and perhaps he may not succeed. But what does success look like for West Ham? You know, we asked that when David Moyes was at West Ham, and we rightly should ask the question again with Julen Lopetegui. We spent a lot of money in the transfer window, but we're not the only team that has done. And many fans did say when David Moyes left that they'd be happy to see better football even if it meant us finishing mid-table. But is that really the reality? If you're new to the channel, please do consider becoming a subscriber of the channel. Content is always free. And whether you're new or existing, if you've enjoyed today's video, please do hit that like button as well. So I've been a bit worried in a way since the game against Fulham at the weekend. And my worry stems mainly from how some sections of the fan base have reacted primarily to the team that Julen Lopetegui selected against Fulham. There are pockets of the fan base now who are already beginning to question Lopetegui, ask him whether he is the right person to be the head coach of the club. Some fans have mentioned are questioning his team selection, his use of the players available to him, the formations that he's playing, and his coaching techniques and his decision making. And the same fans are suggesting that Lopetegui is no better than David Moyes, and some are even going as far as to say he's as bad as Manuel Pellegrini. The appointment of Lopetegui is at the same level of the Pellegrini appointment, and we know that failed, which ultimately led to the return of David Moyes back in December 2019. And other sections of the fan base, or the majority of the fan base, I should say, are saying quite clearly it's way too early to pass judgment on Lopetegui. And only 4 games into the season is no way the sort of time to be judging him. And the argument for that is that we've got the players, some players who are still not fully match fit, as well as having our first international break. There's another one coming up in October, by the way. Our first international break, seeing players flying around the globe to represent their countries. And added to that, we had an injury as well to Nicholas Fulkrug. But then others would rightly say, well, hang on a minute, that's all very well, suggesting that players have gone on international duty and they've come back fatigued, etc. But we've got a squad now, a decent squad, that's meant to have players in it who can step in for players who are injured or fatigued. And that is also a relevant point to make. And then there's the suggestion that fans are suggesting that we're not seeing a different style of football, that it's, again, much the same as David Moyes had. Not only is Lopetegui picking the same players as Moyes would have done, but we're not seeing any difference in the football as well. So is that really true? Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, because what this has done is it's made me question myself, and I didn't think I'd be doing this so early in the season, as to which side of the fence I'm sitting on. And would it change in time to come? Now, I'm on the fence at the moment, saying, well, not on the fence. No, I take that back. I'm of the suggestion that it's way too early to be judging Julen Lopetegui. I won't lie. It's really surprised me and kind of shocked me a little bit to see the starting lineup against Fulham last weekend. But it hasn't made me knee-jerk into believing that all of a sudden Lopetegui is some kind of failure, or he's going to fail at West Ham. However, I've been wrong about managers in the past. If you recall, during David Moyes' reign, I constantly tried to look for positives in some of the things that he used to do. And I guess when the results were going our way, I kind of chose to overlook the style of play. Um, but not having a big enough squad, for example, was a Moyes failure. Not using his subs in the right way or not using them quickly enough was another Moyes failure. Stubbornly selecting the same players week in, week out, despite their performances, good, bad, or indifferent, were just some of the things that fans were fed up with. Of course, along with suggesting that the low block kind of killed many fans' love for watching West Ham. And it is about Lopetegui's starting lineup, really, for the Fulham game that seems to have triggered this negativity from some of the fans. The starting lineup had two players in it in particular that were reminiscent of David Moyes, Thomas Soucek and Mikel Antonio. Now, to be honest with you, I did ask myself after the game, had we got the result that we did get, the 1-1 draw, but these two players were not in the starting lineup, would fans have been disappointed? And I genuinely think the answer to that is no. I think if we'd have got a 1-1 draw and Soucek and Antonio didn't start the game, I genuinely think fans would have gone, yeah, great. We got stuffed by them twice last season. Getting a point at their ground is good, is an improvement. But it's the psychological thing, isn't it? The psychological impact that we saw Thomas Soucek and Mikel Antonio lining up in the game against Fulham, which kind of triggered some of the negativity. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was a bad move. I couldn't believe it myself. The thing is, though, what Lopetegui has done by selecting those two players, he's set the scene now. He's set the scene where it has enabled fans to cast doubts on him as a coach and on him being successful at West Ham United. But was Lopetegui justified in putting out that starting lineup? Let's confirm the facts as we know them. You know, as far as midfielder availability was concerned, Julen Lopetegui's got quite a number of players that he can select. He's got about 10 different players that he could have chosen. Carlos Soler, Lucas Paqueta, Mohamed Kudus, Crescencio Somerville, Luis Guilherme, Edson Alvarez, Jared Bowen, Guido Rodriguez, Thomas Soucek, and Andy Irving. Now, all right, look, we can whittle these down, can't we? Of those players, Soler was still not fully match fit, which was demonstrated, should I say, when he came on later in the game. He was, scurrying around and looking to get involved, but you could just see he was just not really sharp. Paqueta, as I mentioned, he flew back all the way back from South America to play in the game. And he played at 1 o'clock on last Wednesday morning. And by the time he came back and rested, etc., it was quite late. So it was touch and go whether he should be picked or not. And maybe Lopetegui just thought, well, the best I'm going to get out of him is half a game. But as I said a moment ago, that's why you have your squad. When you have players coming back late, then select another player that's more, sort of ready to start. Now, at this stage of the season, Lopetegui seems to think that, or seems to prefer to have Jared Bowen, Mohamed Kudus, and Crescencio Somerville only as wide players. He's not really given them. I know Bowen went as a striker later on in the game in the second half, but generally speaking, when he starts any of these players, they're starting out wide. We've got the issue, haven't we, of Kudus being out on the left, which doesn't suit him, and we got Bowen on the right. And so that means with Crescencio Somerville is highly unlikely if Lopetegui continues to pick Bowen and Kudus to play out wide. Somerville's not likely to start ahead of either of those two players. And then Rodriguez and Alvarez, well, they started anyway in the holding midfield role. We kind of knew that. And it seems also pretty evident at this moment in time that Lopetegui has maybe not quite the belief in Andy Irving and Luis Guilherme. Maybe he thinks they're not ready enough or good enough to start a Premier League game as yet. Now, this does ask another brief question of whether Lopetegui was actually happy with the players that Tim Steidlen brought to him over the summer. What did he want? Luis Guilherme. And did he want to keep Andy Irving? Well, when it comes to Guilherme, we were told by Lopetegui himself that he would be involved in the first team. He would be, part of the first team setup. Um, Probably why we're not seeing Luis Guilherme getting any starting time in the under 21 squad. He can. He's eligible to play in the under 21s, of course. So Lopetegui must consider him to be good enough to be around the senior squad. But maybe because the competition is so high at this moment in time, that the young Brazilian will just have to bide his time. But we've also not, we mustn't forget that Guilherme wasn't much of a starter for Palmeiras. In fact, in the 45 appearances he made for the Brazilian club before he signed for West Ham, he only made 12 starts in all competitions. So he is a work in progress. And another reason why I think we must be patient. Now, having said that, would Saturday's game against Fulham, with players coming back late from international duty, players injured, and so on and so forth, not match fit, etc., wouldn't that have been an opportunity to maybe at least give Guilherme some game time? Same thing goes for Andy Irving. He did really well in pre-season. He did really well in the behind closed doors friendly that West Ham played against Dagenham and Redbridge last week. He scored 2 goals in that game. Now, apparently, Lopetegui and Steidlen blocked attempts from other clubs to sign Irving in the summer. So he would he not at least been another option instead of Thomas Souček in midfield? But for me, to be honest, what Lopetegui could have done and perhaps should have done was to have selected Crescencio Somerville to play out on the left side, drop Souček for this game, and then play Kudus in the middle. Because with that lineup, even if you had Antonio up front, but with the likes of Kudus behind him, going on one side, Somerville on the other, you've got pace there. And perhaps that would have been the better thing to do. Or, of course, he could have started Paqueta and kept Kudus out on the left, or maybe even on the right. And still bring Somerville in some way, and not played Souček and Antonio at all. Now, as for who could have led the front line, Danny Ings also impressed in that behind closed doors game against Dagenham and Redbridge. He scored a hat-trick. But like many fans, myself included, we kind of dismissed that game, didn't we? It's only a game to give players some match fitness. It's only a 60-minute game. It didn't really matter too much. But Danny Ings still did the business in that game, and it resulted in him coming on and scoring the equaliser against Fulham as well. But one has to ask, if Nicholas Füllkrug had been fit, had he not got injured during his time over with the German squad, would Ings even have been on the bench at the weekend? Not too sure. Maybe. However, look, like I said, he had options, Lopetegui, in midfield with various players, but he also had options up front as well. If not Ings, he could have played Kudus up there or Bowen up there instead of Antonio. So Lopetegui did indeed have options to have not had to play Souček and Antonio, or not start them in the game against Fulham. Now, does that error of judgment, however, translate into what some fans now believe, that Lopetegui is not the right man to lead West Ham United? I don't think it does say that, to be honest. But I guess we will have an answer when we see the starting lineup against Chelsea this coming weekend when it's announced. If Lopetegui plays Antonio and Souček again, I think, and it doesn't work again, then I think there'll be guns blazing. Fans will be aiming criticism and probably rightly so, at Lopetegui if he plays that lineup again. If they're dropped, then he has learnt something from the Fulham game. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. Um, with the greatest of respect to Souček and Antonio, they've been great servants for West Ham United over the years that they've been with us. But we've got a squad of footballers who are better, more skillful, play a different kind of game. And maybe now is the time that Lopetegui does need to start putting a bit more faith, if that's what it is, into some other players. Now, he's already going to have to probably make a change in defense anyway, with the likely injury to Emerson, maybe seeing him missing the game against Chelsea. Lopetegui may have to shuffle his defensive pack anyway. But we could probably see, excuse me, we could probably see Dinos Mavropanos being moved to the right as a right back, which means that he could then bring in Jean-Claire Todibo to partner Kilman in central defence, and then Wan-Bissaka being used out on the left. That's a possibility. Now, look, whichever lineup Lopetegui goes with, to stop the murmurs of discontent, he really does have to do something about Souček and Antonio. But what about the other criticism that we haven't seen a change of our style of play? Well, I disagree with that, to be honest with you. We no longer see the low block, but there's a price to pay there because when you don't have the low block, when you're sort of defending further up the field, it means that you're opening yourself up a little bit when you lose the ball. Lopetegui, he's brave enough to make decisions with the substitutions. He did change it, and many say that the lineup that came out in the second half should have been the lineup in the first half. Okay, I accept that, to be honest with you. But at least he's demonstrating that he's not afraid to make changes in order to try and affect the game. He had brave attacking intent because at one point, when we're still not getting that ball in the net, he took off both defensive midfielders in order to put on a very attack-minded front line. We've had more of the ball. Another complaint, under Moyes was that we weren't getting enough possession. We've had more possession. We had something like 45 possession of the ball against Fulham at the weekend. Away from home, that's pretty good. And the pressure paid off because we ended up getting the equaliser. So also, we're mixing our game up. Lopetegui has done what he said he would do. There are different ways of playing the game, different ways to try and win a game or try and get into a game. If you need to play the long ball, you'll play the long ball. If you need to play it on the ground, you do that. If you need to play it out wide and get crosses in, he'll do that as well, which is really, really good. And it bodes well. So I've seen changes. I think many fans have to what the style of play was in the past. What we've just now got to do is, I really do hope we don't go down that slippery path of beginning to suggest that, it should be Lopetegui out. Because if that does happen after not so many games, we might start to be looking at ourselves in the mirror and going, were we a bit too foolish? Are we going to go through all that negativity again? How long do we give Lopetegui? Well, I suggested in my show on Monday night that I think by the end of October, we should have a much, much better idea as to the quality and the style of play that he wants us to play. And I think that will be fair. All right, there's going to be, like I said, another international break, which is not going to help us. But I think by then, by the end of October, we would have played enough games and all our players would be match fit in order for Lopetegui to be able to change it on a regular basis, give players a rest. That's what I'm hoping to see after the next international break. Those players that did not go on international break will come into the fold in order to give the players that did go on international break a chance to have a rest. So that's what I'm looking forward to. So it's too early. I think we have seen change. I think most of it has been positive. Yes, okay. He messed up with regards to his team selection, but that's not, that should not be the only thing that we need to just hold on to in order to serve criticism on the head coach. If it's the same now as if it's the same at the end of October as it is now, fair play, but far too soon to make that level of criticism. Right. If you are, like I said, if you've yet to become a subscriber, please do consider subscribing. Please hit that like button, and I will see you all again pretty soon.